do you do? You gentlemen, of course, know how to push a product. That essentially is your job. My presence here is for much the same purpose, simply to push a product. To acquaint you with an entertainment product which we hope and which we rather expect will make your product pushing that much easier. What you're about to see, gentlemen, is a series called The Twilight Zone. We think it's a rather special kind of series. Essentially, people watch television to get entertained. And the keynote of this series, the thing we're concerned with, the thing we're aiming for, the thing we're working toward is entertainment. This is a series for the storyteller, because it's our thinking that an audience will always sit still and listen and watch a well-told story. And now that I've immodestly gone on record predicting the high quality of this series, let me very briefly show you what we mean by a special kind of series. You know, writers in general are notoriously bad verbal tellers of stories. We do much, much better behind a typewriter. So I hope you'll bear with me while I tell you about a few stories that happen to be the first ones we're shooting in our current production cycle. This is sand. It represents desert. The desert that you'll see on your screen in a story we call The Lonely. The Lonely is about a man sentenced to a lifetime of solitary confinement. The confinement takes place on a sandy asteroid far out in space. It's the story about a man slowly succumbing to a kind of nightmarish loneliness, a gradual disintegration of mind and body because human beings have that palpable need for companionship. A most benevolent and compassionate official sends the prisoner a long rectangular box containing, well, a machine. A machine inside of a robot built in the form of a woman. It's a robot that talks and acts like a human being. A robot that thinks like a human being. Gentlemen, I can only tell you that The Lonely, which involves a man and a woman made out of plastic and wires with a machine for a heart, will provide a most bizarre experience. As to the physiological extensions of their relationship, that is, man and female machine, and what they do in their spare time, we're leaving this wide open. Object and point here, a file cabinet containing a contract, all very legal and proper, except the party of the first part in this case. Well, what do we call him? He has a lot of names. Beelzebub, Mr. Scratch. No. Well, that happens to be the party of the first part in a somewhat charred contract. Only in our story, which we call Escape Clause, his name is simply Mr. Cadwallader. As portrayed, he has all the charm of a well-tipped waiter. He makes a deal with a little man who has a psychotic fear of dying. It's really a simple contract. Mr. Cadwallader supplies the immortality, and the little man supplies his soul. And then our little man proceeds to live it up, or down, depending on the moral view. But he gets bored with immortality, and he then proceeds to live a very out-of-the-ordinary kind of a life. A life best described as simply violent. He was so bored with constantly being the only survivor. So he now turns to homicide, happily aware that while a jury may convict him, there isn't a single legal modus operandi that the state can use to put him away. A gas chamber? Impossible. They can't kill him. Hanging, electrocution, none of these things are operative on our little friend. He's immortal. But what happens, and we'd be most appreciative if you wouldn't tell this to your friends, is that a very good lawyer pleads his case and gets him life imprisonment. Poor little guy. Yeah, he has immortality. He can live forever, right here, behind these things. We'll hold up on telling you the ending. Just think about it. It'll come to you. Parenthetic note here. On The Twilight Zone, there'll be a variety of stories. And this is a variety that covers not only story type, but time, locale, the nature of the people. For example, this is a Western called Death, Destry, and Mr. Dingle. And this is the principal character in the story. It's a Colt 45. There's a schoolmaster named Dingle who picks up this gun one day, finding it in the schoolyard. Quite accidentally, it goes off on a couple of occasions. First, it hits a rattlesnake between the eyes at 50 yards. Then it knocks the gun out of a desperado's hand. And while it's all quite accidental, the various onlookers make an assumption that Mr. Dingle's a pretty fast gun. And they start to build not only a reputation for this spindly little dude, but also almost a reverent tradition. And as in the classic Western mold, every top gun in and out of the territory converge on the town, ready to invite Mr. Dingle, poor little Mr. Dingle, who really doesn't know how to use a gun, to a showdown. So, Mr. Dingle buys himself a little vial full of liquid, and it's simply out of this world, because it comes with a money-back guarantee, simply that it will make him the fastest gun in the West for 15 seconds. It's this vial he carries into a saloon one night, ready to meet at gunpoint a gentleman called Dirty Dan Destry, a fast gun in his own right. So fast he makes Hugh O'Brien look like Charles Coburn. But when the two men face one another and Mr. Dingle drinks his liquid with the money-back guarantee, he suddenly sees in the hand of his opponent a very familiar vial, identical with his own. I won't tell you the ending, except that it's reasonably happy, if unexpected. I hope I haven't done these stories an injustice, because they'll be much better told by actors in front of a camera, as you'll soon note in the picture you're about to see. All I can tell you is that we think the Twilight Zone is pretty unique. We think it'll be much talked about, and we think it'll also be enjoyed. We think it's the kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seats, but only for that 1/2 an hour. We fully expect they'll go to the stores on the following day and buy your products. We think it's that kind of a show. So now the ham walks off to allow the real object and point to entertain you. The pilot show of your series. Earl Holliman, James Gregory, starring in Where Is Everybody? So, gentlemen, please sit back and take your first trip into the Twilight Zone. See what I mean? And this is really nothing compared to the way Instant Sanka will be disappearing off grocery counters come this fall.
There is a sixth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow,